What war did Israel win that gave them the right to occupy the Palestinians in perpetuity for all of history? Yeah, I get it. I know you're going to hit every Hasbro talking point. That's not true. Israel propped up Hamas for years to keep them in power so that Netanyahu could thwart the creation of a Palestinian state.
Dave Smith just schooled a hardcore Zionist on Piers Morgan's program on Israel's history and consummation of genocide in Gaza. And in this clip, they get into various subjects relating to the history of Israel, including the potential for two-state solutions throughout history, why so many wrong things have been said about that, and also Israel's support for Hamas. So let's take a look at this. Please like the video and subscribe to the channel.
The bottom line is just that it is just, look, to sit here and say that even as you say, obviously, Pierce, it's not like Hamas had to be rocket scientists to figure this out. This is what terrorism is. It's asymmetrical warfare. The action is in the reaction. Osama bin Laden didn't think he could take down the United States of America by taking out our towers. He thought he could lure us into a war in Afghanistan and that might bankrupt us. It was the plan that our CIA coached him through in the late 70s and early 80s with luring the Soviets into Afghanistan. And so the idea that, and look, we did it. We blew $8 trillion in the Middle East since then. And so that's the idea here. And Israel's completely fallen into the trap. But of course, the reason why that Israel has done irreversible reputational damage, the reason why people are abandoning supporting this is really just twofold. Number one, it's clearly not in America's interest. And number two, this is just indefensible. Even if you say that, hey, look, Hamas goes down into the bomb shelters and leaves the civilians up there to be bombed. Okay, but then ain't there a moral question about whether it's the right thing to do to just drop those bombs on the civilians when you know the terrorists are down in the towers? Hold on.
Yeah, absolutely. That would not fly any other place than in Gaza. If you're Israel first, you're adhering to what they're doing in Gaza, just calling these people human shields or saying, hey, there's Hamas there, so we killed all these people. You know, the civilians that died are just collateral damage. Yeah, that's premeditated murder in the United States. And Dave Smith is absolutely correct about the history here. Osama bin Laden clearly wanted to draw the U.S. into a prolonged conflict in Afghanistan and the Middle East in general. He's also right about CIA support for the Mujahideen. The CIA pumped in arms through Pakistan's ISI, that's like their CIA, that got funneled into the hands of these Mujahideen forces fighting for their territory in Afghanistan when the Soviet Union invaded in 1979, 10-year invasion, very costly there, and ultimately retreated in 89. And that's exactly what the U.S. fell for. And that's exactly what Israel is falling for, this massive disproportionate reaction. That's even understating it, because this is an ethnic cleansing campaign trying to push the Palestinians southward into Egypt and, you know, completely annex and occupy that territory.
But you had a chance to go through all this stuff. So I know, but I want you to, can I just you just went off on every talking point.
And I'll shut up. No, just explain that too.
But I'm just going to finish. I'm just going to finish. Okay. Yeah. I'm going to finish what I did. Well, what they should do is embrace a two-state solution. Ultimately, they should stop occupying a people as they've been doing it 5 times,
and the Arabs rejected it.
This okay now.
5 times the Arabs rejected it.
Yeah, I get it. I know you're going to hit every Hasbro talking point. That's not true. There's been lots of books. No, it's not. It's a talking point. It is not true. The Palestinians have never once been offered a full-fledged state. There is not one of those 5 times that they were ever offered a full state. Even, by the way, that's not even your own Hasbro talking point. You're supposed to say 97% of what they wanted, which also is a lie. The point is that it doesn't, no matter what you're going to say here, Israel propped up Hamas for years to keep them in power so that Netanyahu could thwart the creation of a Palestinian state, to then use them as a justification for mass slaughtering a captive people that you have kept stateless for 60 years.
Yeah, that's exactly right. You know, this is widely documented. $1.8 billion went from Israel to Hamas over the years through Qatar as an intermediary. You want to talk about Qatari influence? Well, Netanyahu was happy to use Qatar to fund Hamas when banks in Israel didn't want to deal with funding this terrorist group. And his idea was that will destabilize the Palestinians, pit them against each other, and prevent the rise of a Palestinian state. That's what's happened, I hate to say. Dave Smith's also absolutely correct that there's never really been a true two-state solution that wasn't full of poison pills. The 97% claim is bogus. That usually refers to the 2000 Camp David summit, where the idea of a Palestinian state was worked out, but again, contained all sorts of things that were totally unpalatable to the Palestinians, such as not 97% of the territory from 1967. It would have been closer to like 85%. It would have allowed total Israeli control over water resources in the West Bank, complete Israeli control over, Palestinian airspace and the totality of the eastern border with Jordan. All sorts of other things, including other poison pills that would not have been accepted to the Palestinians. So this claim is so stupid and bogus. And none of these people that say there's been 5 attempts to do that account for any of these things that just were non-starters for the Palestinians. It wouldn't have created a real Palestinian state.
Is morally indefensible. And I'm sorry, I didn't realize I had to actually paint the full thing out. When I was talking about the pro-life analogy, yes, being pro-life is about believing that life begins at conception, but baked in there is also the assumption that you think it's wrong to murder kids. The point is that, yes, if you are pro-life, then you also
murder kids.
Yes, but you're supporting a policy that is doing just that.
There's no policy to murder kids. It's urban warfare. Unfortunately, people die. There's no show me the policy that says you should murder kids in this.
Okay. Yes, I'm sorry. Yes, that is. Look, when you make a decision to drop a bomb on a building where you know there are children inside of it, yes, morally speaking, you murdered those children.
Phone calls. You've told them
so
to
the leaflets
evacuate.
make it not murder. Okay. So how about when they don't?
There's no
How about this last attack?
There's no intent to murder them.
Wait, let me ask you a question. Follow up. How about when they don't? What about when they don't drop leaflets? What about when they don't have evacuation orders? They just did this in Gaza City yesterday. How about that? Is that now murder?
Well,
I just took away your excuses.
No. I could give you an example. They don't have to drop leaflets and give phone calls if they're
so then why are you bringing that up?
I'm saying when you're shooting weapons and Hamas is firing weapons and using it as a military base, they don't have to give leaflets to give evacuation. Instead, if it's a civilian building or something where they can eliminate having casualties, they will do that to the best of their ability. But there's some instances where they can't give notification because Hamas is operating out of these hospitals, operating out of mosques.
Yeah, and that just justifies it. This is the classic collateral damage argument, saying that, hey, this is war, which it's not, by the way. It's a genocide. A war usually has, a concerted opposition, like a power that's vying against another power, when in this case, the Palestinians have been completely devastated. Hamas has something like 13,000 being liberal, maybe 13,000 forces. They're not lobbing rockets into Israel anymore, haven't even done that since April. But yeah, there's a striking irony here that some people profess to be pro-life and they'll support this madness. They'll have this Israel first rally, backing Netanyahu and whatever he wants to do in Gaza, annex it, the starvation campaign, bombing journalists, concerted assassinations, and then the next day they'll go to a pro-life rally. Not seeing any kind of disconnect there, any kind of incontinuity that shows that you really aren't pro-life if you don't hold to that standard in other things. That's what you're getting from Tatum here in his argument.
And they have to do what they have to do in this warfare.
They have to. No, they don't. They actually don't have to.
What should they do then? What should they do?
By the way, I love
what
Pierce.
Should they do?
I love I love Pierce. I think it was Aaron Matei who coined this phrase. I could be wrong about that, but someone said the entire Israeli case rests on you saying that nothing justifies October 7th. But October 7th justifies anything. Like nothing. You're sitting here. Yes. Look,
what
you
should they
can
do,
pick one
Dave?
side or the other. 1 second. You can pick one side. Just I'll answer that question, but just interrupting my point with that question over and over again is just so I can't make my case. There is no, you can go tit for tat here. There's been terrorism on both sides. Israel has been occupying Gaza and the West Bank / and or controlling Gaza and the West Bank since 1967. There's going to be resistance to that. And then for you to say that resistance now justifies us slaughtering people by the tens of thousands, destroying all of Gaza is just, there's no logic in it. There's no morality in it.
Yeah, you can't have the ultimate claim to wage war and genocide against a people because of one atrocity that claimed 1,200 people, which, by the way, several hundred of those deaths were probably caused by Israelis under the Hannibal Directive. This has been exposed by whistleblowers that were hostages released, saying that they got orders to fire upon Israelis. The IDF fired upon Israelis such that they couldn't be taken hostage. And then the disproportionate response you have has killed something like over 100,000 people. There's various estimates on this, and a lot of it doesn't really take account for the number of people missing or presumed dead. Israel itself maintains that something like 63 or 64,000 Palestinians have been killed, and their own database that was leaked, and this story was covered by Glenn Greenwald, shows that they believe 86% of the, I think 83 or 86, I couldn't remember the exact percent, but it's in the 80s, percent of the people that were killed were not Hamas or not Islamic Jihad, not terrorists. They're actually civilians, and that's what you're getting here. I'm sorry, it just would not fly if criminals take hostages in the United States into a hospital, and then we're just going to drop bombs on the whole thing and justify it that, hey, there's criminals in there. They're using them as human shields. That's too bad. Maybe we can justify it if we drop leaflets warning that. That's so insane. But that's the argument they're literally making. That's what Zionists are saying.
What should Israel have done? Number one, Benjamin Netanyahu should have resigned on October 8th. After his plan to prop up Hamas, being this genius right-winger that I'm going to keep Hamas in power because, in his words, he could control the height of the flame, and this will balance things and thwart a Palestinian state. When that blew up in his face, he should have resigned in disgrace that day. They should have had a real investigation about what actually happened on October 7th. Our late friend had some questions about that, didn't he?
Yeah, he did.
They should have really looked into that, which we've never gotten to the bottom of. And then they should have done surgical strikes, targeted assassinations, as Israel has always done throughout their entire history with the terrorism problem. They have never, until Netanyahu, treated it as a problem for the regular old army, and it should have culminated in a real peace process. They should have said, we are going to take out the people responsible for this by targeted strikes, and at the end of that, we're ending the occupation. We're giving all of East Jerusalem, all of the West Bank, and all of Gaza to the Arabs. It's their decision what they want to do in the future. But if we are attacked, we will treat them as a foreign nation and go to war with them. That's what the response to October 7th
And by the way,
yeah, I'm with Dave. Go back to 67 borders, actually entertain sovereignty with these people, and that might end the streak of bloody, warfare and terrorism on both sides, as Dave said. A lot of people don't know this, but Israeli terrorism preceded Palestinian terrorism. If you don't believe me, read up about the Stern Gang and Menachem Begin, the Israeli prime minister that was a terrorist and became prime minister. He started the Likud party. And Dave's referring to, Charlie Kirk raising, the idea on the PBD show. 5 days after October 7th, he appeared on Patrick Bet David and said he didn't believe that this attack could have gone unnoticed. And a lot of things supporting that seem to be true. Egypt tipped off Israel to this attack 3 days in advance. And we know this is widely reported in both the Times of Israel and various sources in the United States that Mossad apparently knew about this attack as much as a year in advance. And Netanyahu was going to go down for fraud and corruption charges, which are still on the table, by the way. They've tried to, purge the attorney general and, delay those charges such that this, Greater Israel Project and genocide in Gaza can go through. But he was going to go down in corruption charges. And you just have to ask yourself, with all these things in combination, whether he just let it go through to do exactly what's going on now and drawing the U.S. into a war in Iran in the process and attacking something like 7 of his neighbors since, Syria and Lebanon and Yemen and Qatar and Iran. And that's what we get for the Israel First foreign policy in the United States.
Officer
Not
Tatum,
this.
I think the biggest mistake Netanyahu has made, of many actually, in terms of tactics and strategy, was the attack in Doha, which failed. It didn't kill any of the Hamas commanders, but the amount of fury that that has created amongst the Arab countries, from Saudi Arabia, the UAE and others, but also apparently, according to Haaretz, amongst Mossad, who are absolutely furious about that attack on one of America's main allies in the Middle East, somewhere with 10,000 American troops in a base there, to just attack with impunity Qatar and to attack people who were at that moment deliberating over a potential peace plan, and then to fail anyway. So you cause all the mayhem without achieving the goal. It seemed to me symptomatic of where Netanyahu's got to. He's not achieving any of the goals here. He's just making things worse and worse.
I think that one could argue that. I'm not disagreeing. I think that there needs to be an investigation into it and figure out what should we do and what should we not do. America knew that he was going to do the attack. There's no way in the world Israeli jets could fly through airspace without America knowing about it and do that attack. So America gave the green light pretty much. And then we go.
Totally agree with them on that. You know, I didn't think I'd agree with Tatum on anything in this, but he's right about that. You know, what U.S. ally could someone bomb that the U.S. wouldn't respond to or lash out at or threaten hostilities toward? You know, certainly Israel would get the full brunt of the U.S. military if they were attacked, or the full brunt of the U.S. pocketbook, as is the case with Netanyahu's quest to cleanse Gaza. But they can just attack Qatar, a U.S. ally, bomb Qatar to clear out negotiators for hostages, and we're still to believe that Israel really wants those hostages released. It's absurd. Hamas was releasing hostages under the various phases of the ceasefire that Trump helped usher as he walked into office, but Netanyahu violated it. He could get all those 50 remaining hostages back tomorrow if he wanted. They don't want those hostages back. They want the hostages and the idea that they're still hostages to serve as the pretext to justify Greater Israel and to justify the genocide.
I want to go back to some of the things that Dave Smith said. You know, it sounds cute to act as if they're just indiscriminately bombing people. They're doing strategic strikes. They have to get approval to do strikes. We know that they're doing it. People don't like it. It's ugly. I get it. I hate that it's happening. I would have ended the war in 48 hours and it would have been a mass casualty situation. However, we would have been done quicker and it would have been 2 years. The two-state solution idea, they don't, why are we lying to ourselves? They don't want a two-state solution. They want Israel to be absolved. They do not want a Jewish state. They made it clear, I don't know for how many years. Netanyahu, they removed Jews from Gaza and gave it to them. And
I don't exactly blame them in that. I don't think you could blame many people for thinking that. That's not all Palestinians. But after 47 and 48, the massive land grab project that seized immense amounts of property, displaced something like 750,000 people in the Nakba, people kicked out of their homes under this globalist land redistribution project known as the Israel Project, just have them kicked out and then not want to reclaim that territory. I just don't think that you can, if you really put yourself into those people's shoes, you could come to the conclusion that they don't want that state to go away. And by the way, I'm an anarchist. I don't want any state to exist. I would like voluntary cooperation and contracts to produce law and not governments. But that to be said, you know, if you are a stateless people under subjugation, of course you're going to say from the river to the sea. By the way, Likud says that in their charter. They say from the river to the sea, you know, in other words, they use the illusion that, hey, the Palestinians are going to be wiped out. That's part of their charter. If you want to talk about Hamas's charter.
what did they do in return? They elected a terrorist organization that extracted funding and resources from them to build tunnels to create terrorism against Israel. They cannot live in peace with these people. They continue to fight against Israel and the Jewish state. And I don't understand why we're acting as if that's not so. They've given them their own sovereignty to a certain degree. Imagine if they had their own state.
Officer Tatum, do you think, Officer Tatum, that Palestinians should have the same rights, human rights, as Israelis?
let me put it in perspective. There
No,
was a war
it's
that
a
was
yes.
fought.
It's a yes or no.
I will.
Pretty
Let me
easy
let me
to
get to it. I will.
No, you can't
I will
equivocate.
answer it. I just
You
need-
either believe
I'm
that
not
or you don't.
equivocating.
The reason I'm
I'm not
asking you,
equivocating.
it's so
But
central.
let me start with your. Let me answer. Let me answer your question
Brandon,
first.
it's so
Yes.
central.
Let me answer your question first. Yes.
Okay, good.
Answer is yes.
Good.
But let me articulate that there was a war fought, and Israel won the war, so they don't have to do anything for anybody.
Wait, what
And I
war?
think
What
that
war are
the
you talking
grace that
about?
they- 1948. Was that not? Was that
Okay,
not
there
a
was a
war that
war-
was fought? They got
Yes,
attacked
there's
on
been
all
many.
sides.
There's been many wars
After they
since
rejected
then.
the two-state
Yes.
solution. After they rejected the two-state solution, a war was fought, they
Right.
won. Every war that has been fought, Israel has won. They've been victorious. They don't owe Palestinians anything, but they are peaceful
which
people
war,
enough
which
to get,
war gave them? Which
no
war gave them the right?
They don't
Hold
owe
on, I'm gonna ask-
them. They don't
So
owe
as a
Palestinians
result,
anything.
right? Yeah. No. Actually, I mean, they only owe them what we all owe each other, I suppose. But what?
I mean,
war
you can make
Israel,
that. You can make that argument,
what
but that's
war,
not a real argument.
Yeah, it is. What war did Israel win that gave them the right to occupy the Palestinians in perpetuity for all of history?
Perfect question there to end this by Dave Smith, and that's exactly right. And what Tatum's arguing in 48, that war, which he portrays as being attacked by all sides, no, that war was initiated by a UN resolution, land grab, land redistribution process, where Palestinian land was seized with the support primarily of Britain and the United States and redistributed to Jews in Israel to create this modern Israeli state. And that is how the war got initiated. Attacked by all sides. No, I think the globalist plan to create that state and do it by carving up the land and property of Palestinians, I think that was the initiation of the war. And Dave's right, no war can justify that. No war can justify holding another people under subjugation for an unlimited time frame, as Israel's claiming the right to do. Certainly not a terrorist attack, which was a terrorist barbaric attack by Hamas on October 7th. But people want to believe that history began on October 7th. The Zionists certainly want us to believe that, and that nothing will, counter the fact that they have the right to do to the Palestinians whatever they want to do, including people that weren't remotely involved in this, killing 100 times the people that died on October 7th. And again, the IDF was probably responsible for some of those murders. But, we have to just maintain an America First approach at this point and realize that this is so fruitless for the U.S. to continue to dump political support and financial support into Israel as all of this is happening. The true best solution, I'm not a big fan of any political solutions, as you guys probably know, but a two-state solution, that kind of political solution would be far better in the hierarchy of options compared to a genocide solution and that being the solution. And that's what, has been openly talked about when you have, Katz talking about how a concentration zone will be formed in Rafah with transfers and relocation, and Ben-Gvir is saying that starvation has to happen. We just can't allow it because it's politically unfeasible. Well, I'm sorry, you are allowing it. You allow it by reducing the aid stations in Gaza from 400 to 4. That's what you do get. So Dave Smith is exactly right here. There are a few, talking about Qatar, I agreed with Tatum, surprisingly so, but he's totally warped on his impressions of the history of Israel and how these things have transpired. The 97% deal, he didn't talk about that. Dave said that, but that's a Hasbro talking point. Tatum did say, hey, there are 5 attempts to create a Palestinian state, a two-state solution. There weren't. There were none that were serious and not loaded with poison pills that couldn't have been acceptable. But that really is what's needed. Or you can go with what Max Blumenthal says, a single unitary state in which all people have equal rights. That would be a better solution than, I don't know, constant subjugation, warfare, and genocide. That seems like a better plan to me, although not a perfect plan. But you do have people like the Irish and English, coinciding after years of conflicts. You have people like Indians and Pakistanis. There have been conflicts. There were recent conflicts in Pakistan, but by and large, you don't have this kind of dynamic. So we know it can happen. We just haven't been willing to embrace that because of the Israel lobby and the Israel first mentality in the United States. But I do want to hear from what you guys have to say. Let me know down below who is right, Brandon Tatum or Dave Smith. Is Dave right about the history of Israel? Is Brandon just glossing over Israel's long-term support for Hamas and just downplaying the significance of that? Let me know in the comments down below. Please like the video, subscribe to the channel. Also subscribe to Piers Morgan Uncensored. Say what you want about Piers. He produces really interesting debates between people like this on his show. And please consider becoming a YouTube member. If you click the member or join button down below, you can help support the channel. And in return for that, I'll give you access to all of my videos before they go live to the general public on YouTube. And until I see you guys next time, no more war, no more debt, no more inflation, and no more empire. Peace out, guys. Catch you in the next one.